his masters. He's been a mountaineer, environmentalist, and explorer, and you'll see and hear about his travels to the 7 continents. He runs one of India's oldest adventure travel companies, IBEX Expeditions, as we all know and have heard about before, and we'll hear more from him on this wonderful event today. So thank you very much, Mandy. Go right ahead. We have a little bit of a glitch with Mandy not being able to play his presentation from his own place, but Kuldeep from Pasrich and Company is doing it for him, so it'll work fine, I think. Let's go, Mandy. Thank you.
Great. Pitu, many thanks, and thank you all for logging in. If we can just all go on mute, except me for the moment, that'll be wonderful. And I do apologize that there's been some system glitch where I can't share, as Pitu just said. But I'll ask Kuldeep, can you put my presentation on screen share, and then we'll rapidly whiz through it, because there are a lot of slides and I hope everybody's in an expedition mood to sort of hang in there. Yep. Can you expand it, Kuldeep, at all? To full screen. To the full screen. Kuldeep, can you get the slide on full screen with that little icon which says slideshow or something? Hello?
Kuldeep, click on this screen part. Click on this screen.
The lower, yeah. Yeah, he needs to go to full screen. Kuldeep, can you hear us?
Anyway, Mandy, you go ahead. You go ahead. It doesn't matter.
Better.
Yeah, yeah.
Kuldeep, just click on anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Just look at his books.
I think I've seen now. I'm trying different things now.
All right, this is wonderful interludes. So, Kuldeep, are you with me? Can we start? Hello? Can you just get Kuldeep here? And oh dear. Well, anyway, that's a lovely view of Nanda Devi and Trishul, pretty much where.
Yes, I'm with you, sir. I can hear you, sir.
Okay. So, Kuldeep, is it possible for you to make the screen a bit larger, the picture?
I'll try. I'll do that, sir.
Yeah, if it is possible. Otherwise, we can go with this.
Kuldeep, you have to click on this icon here, the one that shows screen.
Slideshow, full screen.
Or do it on slideshow.
Okay, 1 second.
Slideshow, full screen.
I'll just start. I'll do that, sir. I'll do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen it before.
So anyway, if you keep...
Which ones do you have of his? Show me.
Yeah, this incredible.
That must be it. Where is it written?
In the geography.
Hello. Kuldeep, should we start rolling the slides, please? Yeah, okay. So that's, Himalayan Edelweiss, and the picture I showed earlier was probably what I saw when I was around, 14 years or something. Next. And the next slide, please. So that's one of the earlier treks that I did out of school, called the Quarry Pass trek, which is quite a famous one for the early explorers that came into the Nanda Devi sanctuary. Next. Pretty much the books that one grew up with, like Edmund Hillary and Chris Bonington and Maurice Herzog, and some of these were, of course, your course books. Next. That's Black Peak, one of the popular peaks in Garhwal, around 21,000 feet. I was lucky to be part of a schoolboys expedition, and this was later also attempted by college. Next. Joining St. Stephen's, of course, we came into a very active hiking club. And that's when I realized that, there were so many luminaries like the P.M. Dases and the Sadeep Sandhus, the Pat Mishras, and all the ex sort of hiking club presidents who were obviously doing enormous amount of climbing and trekking. And I think they were punching way above their weight, because the kind of expeditions that were happening in college, when you look back now, I think, like I said, it was way ahead of time. And that kind of encouraged me to continue the sort of passion. And next. So my first year, we were part of what is called the Lahul Zanskar expedition. That's Bobby Tandon and me going as advanced parties. And like with all good advanced parties, you imbibe before you sort out your route. Next. And that's pretty much the gang that includes Bobby. There's somebody on unmute, yeah? And that's, people like Ashok Bamzai, who was the sort of staff advisor, Bobby Ramani, Joe Chandra, who's now no more, unfortunately, Suvir Kaul, Parminder Brar, P.S. Nat. All these were great characters, Rakesh Veg, and so on. And there's also Chandan Singh, who many might recognize as a college gyp and a cafe server who produced some excellent food for us. Anyway, next. So our objective was to cross Lahul Zanskar by a trek to go from Manali and end up somewhere near Kargil. And it ended up quite an epic trek, because it was 450 kilometers. And what was originally supposed to be 30 days became about, 40 odd days. And anyway, on the way, we not only had the usual problems with snow and rock and the kind of terrain, but we were also attacked by a snow leopard that killed a mule. Next, which is in the next photograph. Kuldeep. Yep. So that's the attack. And the next day, of course, we lost another one down the Khad. Next one. Can you keep moving a little quicker? Then I can, relate to the. This is a Black Peak expedition at base camp. People like Aju Tankha, many will recognize, Sushil Dhaya and the rest of the gang. Jesus. Okay, so that's on Black Peak. Again, we missed it by about 1,000 feet. And move on, please. Yeah, that's nearing the sort of Camp 2, and that's with Tarun Talwar in the next slide. And I think we were about 700-800 feet below the summit. Next. Yeah, that's him. Next one. So around that time in college, we also convinced the government authorities that, students should be allowed to go as liaison officers with foreign expeditions. So this was a trip to the Dunagiri in the Nanda Devi Sanctuary with the Americans. And this was a great opportunity for us to, of course, learn and be on expeditions. Sadly for me, this particular trip, we had 4 people who not only climbed to the summit, but on their descent fell to their death. And they were rescued, or at least buried, by a nearby British couple. Very sad start for me, but I soon learned that in mountaineering, this is something one has to come to accept. Next one. And that's with the lot there. If you can keep moving slowly, in about 10 seconds each, is a good timing. And that's with the British going into Himachal on pretty remote areas, unknown valleys, up the Miyar Nala in this case. Next. But what was also happening in college was that we were doing a lot of rock climbing at that point and discovering lots of areas around Tughlakabad, around Dhauj, and making a huge number of first ascents, which was great fun, and doing it with pretty shitty equipment. Next. Next, please. This is all Tughlakabad, and this is near the President's bodyguard. In fact, I remember climbing up once on this wall and looking at a barrel of a Sten gun, which the guard thought we were trying to ambush the president or some such. But next one. And that's with another friend who's now no more, Rohan Kanai Datta, and myself. We are climbing in Dhauj, which is an area near Delhi. It is quartzite, beautiful rock. And in fact, we had a battle for about 3 years because the mining mafia was trying to, mine this area, and lots of stone crushing units were very upset with us rock climbers because we stopped their business. And thanks to people like Harish Sareen, who were the president of the IMF, the Indian Mountaineering Foundation, they came to our rescue. Next. There's now a book on, like a guidebook on this rock climbing area. So if anybody is keen, they can get a pretty good idea of all the routes which are marked. Next. And it was just an incidental thing that many years later, I was the sort of first, sport climbing manager, if you please, of the Indian rock climbing, sport climbing team. And luckily now we have a pretty good talent in the country, and they're likely to be attempting the Olympics at some point because sport climbing is now Olympic sport. Next. So it wasn't always mountains for me. At one point I linked up with our friend Dhananjay Date and Shumit Banerjee, and we went off to study the tribes and do an expedition to sport climbing manager in the Andaman Islands. So that's that. Next. We came back, of course, gave a lot of criticism to the government on the way it was handling the tribal affairs and such like, and I believe some of it may have got noticed. This was one of my last expeditions into the Nanda Devi sanctuary with the Brits, who were climbing a mountain called Kalanka. Next. Next, please. Next, please. That's the kind of climbing that was going on. And I decided that, whilst we all joined college mainly to sort of get on to IAS, IFS or whatever, and much the same for me, but I decided that I'd take a year off and decide whether, it's a matter of adventure and the heart, or whether it's going to be the IAS and so on. So I went with $500, which was the allowance at that time. And next, landed up in Valda Osta near Kurmayur. And we had many friends, so I joined them for Langlof skiing. Next. Can you keep moving a little faster? Yeah, that's climbing on the Alps over there in Italy. Next. And doing a circuit from around the whole of Matterhorn, which starts in Italy, goes across Switzerland and back into Italy again. Next. And that's when I was doing a lot of, when you're on a tight budget, obviously you've got to make do, and friends will only host you at a point. I wanted to learn some very severe rock climbing, as hard as one could in those days. So there was a deal that was done at this mountain hut that if I worked for 7 days and built their outhouse, I could do some of the climbs in return by the guides, who would normally charge around, $75 a day. And my entire budget for the year was 500, so there's no way that was happening. So I continued building the outhouse. But on the 5th day, we were able to finish the outhouse. And I still had 2 days to go. And there's lovely climb on the right that you see, which hadn't been done, obviously, by an Indian before. So I cast myself as a palmist. I took off my scarf, and I made a deal with the guide that whatever your guests come and I read their palms, whatever money comes, whether it's $10 or $100, that's my fee for you. And that worked out, and I was able to climb this mountain called Torre di Prati. Next. This is in Switzerland in the Engadine Valley. Please keep moving. Can you keep moving? Yeah, trying a little bit of hang gliding in the Chamonix area, which was quite new at that time. Next. I ended up in Plasy Brennan, which is the national school in Wales. And after learning a lot of the sort of outdoor stuff, I ended up being an instructor here. Next. And although they couldn't pay you in cash because of the laws, I got enough beer, free and board and lodging, which was great fun. Some mountain rescue there, training and rock climbing. Next, please. This is called Cemetery Gates, and there's some fascinating cliffs in Wales. which were on the sea cliffs called the Anglesey area. Next. And this is probably the harder climb there that I managed, called Dream of White Horses. And it's a sea cliff and wonderful climbing. Next. Off for some more Langlof skiing. This time I decided to go to Scotland and continue with climbing. Can you keep rolling the slide? Yeah, that's some ice climbing. Keep going, please. Yeah, and this is probably the hardest snow and ice climb that I could manage, which was first done by luminaries like Chris Bonington and so on. And this was quite a nice way to end off my 1 year almost in Europe. Next. And that's the top of the climb, where I'm still wearing a turban and a woolly hat rather than a helmet, which I should have. Next. And that's pretty much where one had this sort of famous Robert Frost moment, ki life mein kya karna hai kind of story. And when I decided that I want to get into adventure and, there was an opportunity for adventure travel, I think the Robert Frost moment for my parents must have been through a very frosty look that they gave me. Next, please. I think keep rolling it, keep going every few seconds. That's Z1, another expedition with the Japanese. Yeah, next. This is in Zanskar, very nice area, which many of you have visited, I'm sure. Again, this was a first descent. We were very lucky to make it with the Japanese this time. Next. And that's the summit with all the Zanskar range at the back. Next, please. With Noon and Kun, I was lucky to get on to Kun as well, which is a 7,000 meter peak. Next. Keep rolling. Some of the views from on top. I happened to be in USA and we did some rafting in Oregon, which gave us an idea that the Zanskar River would be a good expeditionary one to explore, which the Americans had started promoting. And this is down that river, which is now one of our iconic rivers in India. And it's called India's Grand Canyon, actually. Next. That's pretty much some of the views on the Zanskar. Keep going. Yeah, keep going. Pretty much all the views. This was an interesting expedition. Then we decided that, since we were doing trips, the great joy was to explore a lot of activities and a lot of new things that one could then put out to other people. And this was a trip that I did 1,500 kilometers in 1981 when there were no bicycles with these, 10-speed and 15-speed gears. And somebody like Michael Daruwala, who was a Stephanian, came to my rescue because all these French guys who came to India bought their very fancy bikes. So I managed to get onto this. I'd never cycled in my life before for more than about, a couple of hours. And there I found myself doing 3 weeks and 1,500 kilometers. Next. That's the team. Then Charu, me and, move on to the rock climbing. Charu, myself and Rohan Datta decided that nobody had actually done a rock climbing expedition around the country. So we started off by going to Mumbai, and that's him climbing at some of the rocks outside of Mumbai. Next. And finally, we ended up in Bangalore after having done Pachmadi and various other places. And this was a big sort of a rock climb that the Bangaloreans had been trying for 5 years, and they hadn't managed to climb it. So very condescendingly, they told us, yes, we'll give you a guide and he'll take you to the spot. And sadly for them, we went and climbed it. Anyway, next. And that's on the climb, you will see. Next slide, please. That's the start. We had been lucky to get some of the gear from overseas, the sophisticated rock climbing kit that we needed. Can you keep rolling with the slide every 5 seconds or something? That's easier then. And that's, I think it's Charu climbing up a very varied kind of terrain. Next. And this is a place where, unfortunately, we got benighted. So that's Can, as we used to call him, Rohan Datta. And right on top is I think it's either me or Charu. And I think that's about a rope length distance that we had. So I was in a crack up, and Charu and Can were on a ledge at the bottom, and we got benighted because we couldn't make the summit on that first day because there was a lot of route finding and stuff. But luckily, the next day we managed to get up, much to the disappointment of our Bangalorean friends. In 86, we decided that, we discovered that nobody had actually done a camel ride from north to south of the Indian desert. So we mounted a gang and off we went on camelback, trying to cross the Thar desert, which luckily we did, although I lost about 50% of the friends because it's not the most comfortable thing to do. Next, please. Keep rolling your slides, please. Yeah, just as a visual, it'll follow through. Yeah, that's pretty much the camping. And we ended up in the run of Kutch. The same year, we decided, okay, now how do I gain some more friends if I've lost them over a camel expedition? I asked Charu, Tejveer, and a Swedish friend of mine, and we said, let's try and attempt a peak called Meru in India, which is, never been done by Indians, very severe climb, and let's try and apply these very advanced techniques. So off we went. That's me climbing in Chamonix for our training. Next. And that's the massif that we were going to climb, the right-hand side summit. And next. And that's the four of us. It was an Indo-Swedish effort. And we had no tents, no Sherpas, no guides, no porters. And we carried everything ourselves. And the idea was to keep it super lightweight, only do bivouacs, no tents were allowed. And that's going past the crux. Next, please. Also here, interestingly, we couldn't make the summit on our last day, which we had planned to. So we got benighted again. But we had a bivouac sheet. We took out the stuff out of rucksacks. We shoved our legs in it, and we survived the night. And next morning, it was a brilliant day. And there we are on the summit. And next. And that's Charu and OK Nilsson. Kuldeep, if you have the video and you can play it, great. Otherwise, we'll move on. I think
I'll play, sir. I do this screen share again, sir. I'll play in the last one. Maybe shall I play now, sir?
Let him pay the 10.
Okay. I think let's move on. Yeah, we'll play it at the end if need be.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think the best thing is, Kuldeep, if you can just keep moving in about 3 to 4 seconds each, then I can keep playing the commentary. In 1989, we got an INLAC's grant to study mountain rescue and train in it in Scotland and Wales. And a part of this was also coming from the fact that in the early 80s, very sadly, we were on an expedition where we lost a college friend called, Ishwaran Bharatan Bota. And I'd always had this thing that perhaps we can strengthen mountain rescue systems in the Himalaya. And we were able to come back. And the three of us who went was Parminder Brar, who many of us know as Purdy, and he was an INLAC scholar already. So we set it up in India, and we had the help of Sir Edmund Hillary, who was our patron. We established a foundation called the Himalayan Evacuation and Life-Saving Project, taught the local people on what it means to do land rescue and helicopter rescue. A lot of the syllabus was inducted in the mountain institutes. And all in all, I think it was a great experience having the support of Edmund Hillary. And curiously, 25 or 30 years later, I'm looking after the Mountain Rescue and Search Committee at the Mountaineering Foundation, trying to revive a new set of rules for rescue. So this was another, in 1989, I got a chance to get to the Arctic on an environmental expedition, where the idea was to take about 25 students from around the world who were going to study the ozone hole issue and the pollutants in the Arctic. Can you keep rolling? We had, of course, the support of Prince Philip, who was our patron, and I used to look after Duke of Edinburgh Ward in North India. So there we are at 80 degrees north in the Ellesmere Island in the Arctic. And that's Shailendra Sinha from the Doon School, heavily supported by Tata because it's a massive expedition. And we did fun things like adventure, but also science things like the learning part. And this is building igloos. And we also tested the ice for all the pollutants, which with the support of the Canadian and the American scientists, it was proven that, it contained all the horrible PCBs, and the ozone hole was expanding as we knew, and so on. So with all these big macro problems, I think the one big learning was that, each one of us can make a difference in our own way, in our private lives. And that's the pledge I took. And that was a game changer for us. Anyway, having come back, I thought, having been to the Arctic at minus 40, let's do something warm. And we discovered that nobody had actually done an elephant expedition. So we took on an elephant expedition across the jungles of Kerala for 101 kilometers over 10 days. And that went off well, except that it didn't become like a commercial offering by the state government of Kerala or by the private sector, because at that point, the realization was dawning that this is not the way you want to treat elephants. And I'm so glad that today, at our Responsible Tourism Society, we are even considering how you use animals, especially elephants, in the world of tourism. Another interesting one was in Sikkim, where we went on a youth expedition for teaching and learning young people the science behind the outdoors, how you can understand hydrology, the mountains, the botany, and so on. And this is pretty much, which is a key ingredient, I think, in nowadays sort of, learning through the outdoors, as it were, not just about team building and leadership, but a lot about the science, and which is why it's so important to protect our nature that we learn so much. That's the Gochala trek that we did under the shadows of Kanchenjunga. Next. So it was around 2004 that one was reading many accounts of the silk trade and, people and photographers who had been there, that I realized that perhaps from an ecotourism point of view, if we were able to do something in winter in Zanskar on this fantastic river that freezes in the winter, maybe there's a good way of doing a win-win tourism experience, which will also benefit the local communities and give a lot of employment generation to Ladakhis and so on. And that's what happened when we mounted an Indo-British expedition, and we got the support of the government. The J&K state was very happy that we'd create a new product, and this is all of us going into, and they actually got us a helicopter which flew us to a place called Padum, and that's where we started our trek. Actually, if you can just wait for a second, it's an interesting incident that we almost lost our, the helicopter ride, because I think the general was a, pretty large guy with big handlebar mustaches, and he stuck his hand out and he said, "I'm General somebody or the other, Prasad and something." And I said, "I'm particular Mandeep Singh." And I think for a second or two, he was not very amused, but then he caught the joke, and it was all good. We got the ride, and that's the start of the expedition. Staying in local homes, giving them revenue, and going through this gorge, which is absolutely amazing. And since I have a disclaimer of being a Sardar from Punjab, I can say it was absolutely gorgeous as well. Next, please. Band of porters getting revenues about 3 times the amount that they would get in normal course of time. And this is a frozen, waterfall. And I do admit that sometimes, your sense of humor can freeze as well, because I remember this one section where we had to take off our boots and wade through the waters. And obviously it's around minus 15, your feet get a bit lacerated. So when we came out to the other side, Mike, one of the Brits, said, "Mandeep, do your feet hurt?" And I said, "Mike, feet don't matter to us in India. We change to the metric system," or some such. So we also tried, we were lucky to have the Explorers Club flag, which is an honor. And we tried to climb Stoke Kangri, which we failed because of bad avalanche conditions. And I'm happy to say that Chadar, or the river Zanskar as it is called, is a terrific sort of a tourism product today. And it was basically the opening up of winter tourism for Ladakh since that time in the 2004 era. I found myself in New Zealand, so I did a bungee, and they issued me a wonderful certificate which said I was brave, courageous, and outstandingly idiotic enough to bungee, defying all laws, and I was completely out of my mind, attached to only to a ludicrously long rubber band. Anyway, I also managed to do a tandem skydive, and these were relatively new things for me as an experience. So I called up my wife Anita next day, next please, in India, and I told her, I bungeed yesterday, and oh dear. Can we go on mute? Oh my God.
The moment you mention Anita, this is what happens.
Oh my God. Yeah, we have a few people who are, we can only request them to go on mute because, all right. Okay. So anyway, because I'd called her up and, I was reasonably excited, and I told her, I did a bungee last evening and I did a tandem skydive this morning. So there was a kind of a silence, and she said, well, I would have killed you if you hadn't survived, that sort of stuff. Anyway, Marcia Fishing was next as an expedition. And somewhere along this time, of course, we were all getting very concerned about our environment. Keep rolling the slide, please. And we held many, environment seminars, and we had Reinhold Mester, people like Edmund Hillary, and they came out with a very nice Himalayan environment code on things like, camping away from fresh water and such like. And these were all very valuable things that were the bedrock of what some of our own eco initiatives that took place, both at the private sector level, at our own company, where we stopped any campfires in the Himalayan areas because, it was meant for the local people, the wood and so on. Much of the humanitarian work that was done, like giving eyeglasses to people who wove the saris and so on. And soon enough, we had to get the entire tourism industry along. And that's when we started through an organization called PATA. Because even today, as you see, the vernacular architecture in the Himalaya is being forgotten. And this is a tragedy of enormous proportions. But there were good things happening, like in Kerala, they were turning hunters into guides and poachers into guides and such like, and we experienced all this. And I'd also gone to Africa, and we studied how they translocate lions and stuff, and luckily we don't follow that system. But the work on environment had started in right earnest. And in 2002, there was a very interesting expedition which to celebrate the year of mountains and the year of ecotourism, we were called to the Swiss Alps as 2 Pakistanis and 2 Indians as an Indo-Swedish Pakistan friendship expedition. And the idea was that, we would look at how the Swiss have, next please, have taken a glacier called the I.L.A glacier, and they've declared it as a peace park, as a heritage site. So the idea was, could we think of doing that for the Siachen glacier between India and Pakistan? And these are the 2 sets of people who climbed together. We got on a house, like a house on fire, and they were really nice guys, despite the fact that Colonel Sher Khan fired on our troops in Kargil, from the other side. And that's the Siachen base camp. Unfortunately, the statistic is so terrible that 1,000 kilograms of human waste go into the glacier every day for the last 35 or 40 years. So you can imagine the kind of shit that we've dumped. These are all our supporting organizations, worldwide bodies like the IUCN, the UIAA, and so on. We spoke at the UN in Geneva. We talked about it at various fora. President Adolphe Augy who was the former president of Switzerland, became our patron. and we used Dr. Karan Singh to publicize. And to some degree, we've had engagement with the army troops, and we know it's a reality that, things are not going to disengage in a hurry. But until then, at least our environmental footprint of the Indian Army on the glaciers can be reduced. And I'm very happy to say that they've actually taken on some measures, some of it which you can talk later about. We then did an Andaman expedition to map the tourism potential. Again, a supported expedition by the government of India. And we had the boat of the chief secretary, who was no other than Shamsher Sharif at that time. And we produced a white paper for the Ministry of Tourism on the kind of tourism that you needed there. This is on the summit of Barren Island, which is the only volcano in India. Did some deep sea fishing. Then went on to the Nicobar Islands to discover that until we don't get it right on Andamans, there is no sense in opening Nicobar. Now that position should be changed, although I'm told the development plans for Andaman and Nicobar might be quite a sort of a harrowing situation for the fragile environment there. This was in Nagaland. Can you keep rolling? We got hunters, we got poachers turned into hunters. We talked to communities in Arunachal, and then went back to Bhutan, where I was as a kid next. And we did the Paro to Thimphu trek, which is called the Druk Path. This is the grandfather of the current king, who was there at the time we used to visit during high school. And people like Vijay Chibbar, Ajay Chibbar, and all were all part of the gang in Bhutan whilst growing up. And see the architecture that they've maintained. And this is one of the most amazing. If you can go back to one last slide, Kuldeep. Yeah. Many of us have been to Bhutan, of course, and the architectural harmony and the integrity that they display, I think, is something we really, really need to learn, because even though I speak to you all in the Himalaya, and many of us have been there, I think that's the area where we're really tending to mess it up a little bit. Borneo was another expedition. Next, keep rolling, please. Wonderful initiatives of rehabilitating the orangutan, and very interesting ideas of how travelers can support a national campaign. Like we could have done something similar with the tiger, for example. Every person who checked into Borneo at the hotel was added on his invoice a single $1 contribution to the rehab center. Nice ideas. This is the sort of canopies that are famous in Borneo, where you walk through, look for the proboscis monkey. And because we discovered that palm oil plantations had ruined the forest, we made it a point to do a tree planting campaign just to make a point to the government. That's climbing on Kinabalu Peak. That was my son earlier. This is a friend called Shumit Banerjee, also from college. Shonu, who later, I think, ended up becoming the head of Booze and Company, and I believe was attracted to it mainly because of the name more than anything else. That's Sarawak. It is called the Long Houses. And by this time, the Ecotourism Society of India had been put up because the government asked us to come together as a national body. And then we tried our hand at the Chambal, because we thought that if we can convert the dacoits into guides or tourism related people, that could be a great success. So again, working with the government, with the police department, with the forest department, off we went. We saw these guys right over there, and we talked to the communities. And that is actually Sujit Banerjee, who was the previous tourism secretary, also from college. And he came with us with a view not only to do the conversion and to make it a tourism experience, but also to allow this area to be possibly nominated as a World Heritage Site, because the place is so unique. Tibet was another interesting experience. Lake Mansarovar, of course, many of us have been through the trek, and the 3-day parikrama that you go across, with the Mount Kailash. That's the high pass that you ascend at 18,500 feet. And then finally, we went to the base camp of the Everest north side, which sadly, they have now started to make a road. and that was mainly to do with the Olympics. And we made a huge campaign against the fact that, you know, some of these pristine areas, you really should not be shoving in roads and, you know, having more respect and such like. But of course, the Chinese came back and said that, look, if you can burrow a road and a tunnel through Mont Blanc, who the hell are you guys telling us about not doing this? So it's interesting. We found ourselves in celebrating the 150 years of the Alpine Club in Switzerland, and with our friends who were involved with our Indo-Pakistan expedition. Yeah, it was not just celebrations, but also hang on, I'm just trying to mute a few people. Oh dear. Okay, that's better.
Mandy, you also need to get on.
Yes, I do. Okay, so if you keep rolling the slides very slowly, about 2 to 3 seconds each, you'll get a sense. That's Charu and me climbing on Riffelhorn, because it wasn't all just celebration, but we had to do some work. And carry on, please. And Charu, as you notice, never wears socks, you know, on these rock climbs. That's only because he's slow and I can't tell him to pull up his socks. And there we are, reasonably pleased. And that was the first ascent by Indians. And we climbed a few other peaks in Switzerland. This is Pina de la Lee, next. And, Saas-Fee and so on is the region here, called I.L.A was their 4,000 meter peak. And it's quite bizarre because, you know, you could just get off a tram. And here, this is interesting because we did carry a small pennant. And if you look closely, it actually says SSC 125th year, which is a celebration of our college 125th year. Next, please. Some more rock climbing in America, in Colorado, what is called, and then there was a trip to Arunachal. Just keep rolling it, yeah? And of course, we took great delight in putting out our Tiranga because at that point, Chinese were claiming this area. And I happened to be going to China and Mongolia, and I gave a lecture and I showed that slide to make sure that the message was loud and clear. Mongolia was another great expedition on camelback, on with trekking, with yak herders and such like, staying in yurts or gairs as they call them, and pretending to be a little bit of Genghis Khan, I think. And then keep moving, please. And of course, when I saw Anita in a crazy hat, I said, it's time to change a destination. Next. So we thought of Madagascar because that's another unique place of the world where it broke away from Africa. And most of the biodiversity, like 80%, is unique to it. This is the Singi. It's a World Heritage Site, and you can actually walk through it, see the lemurs, go to the baobab trees. And we also hired a dhow, you know, which sailed the Mozambique Channel, trying to replicate the journeys of the early Arab traders that used to come here. Keep rolling, please. And of course, Anita did funny things with the hat, so it was time to change destination. Next. We went off to Peru to the Amazon rainforest and did some trekking there with the local people who acted as porters. They sang songs. We did some rafting, and of course the Machu Picchu. And this little peak at the back is called Huayna Picchu. And you just end up saying, why not do that? That's Anita again doing something crazy with hats. So I had to leave. On to Switzerland, where at that time there was a lot of debate about the future of mountaineering and the Alps. So they were celebrating their 150 years. And I think this is a debate we still need to have about how we are going to handle tourism in fragile areas like Himalaya, the Alps, and many other parts of the world. This was a little bit in the Spey River in Scotland. And then Morocco was next. That's their World Heritage sites like Volubilis, Fez, and we tried to climb Tupkal Peak. We failed because it was winter, we had bad conditions, but we did take a trip into the Sahara over camelback. This time I was smart enough to do only 2 days of camel riding, so I lost no friends. Then we thought we should change desert. We went to Namibia, and that is Africa's really, wonderfully kept secret, a wonderful land. Some of us went by bush plains, the others went by land, and we crossed the Tropic of Cancer. Next, keep rolling, please. In, our sort of safari gear with Etosha National Park. And going into Damaraland, we did a unique expedition trip, which was to do rhino tracking on foot. And that, believe me, was a very exciting moment. This is the amazing sort of clay pans of the Namibian desert. Next, please. We climbed some of the highest dunes over there. This is called Big Daddy. And as you can spot, there are at least a couple of other Stephanians like Krish and Monica Dhawan and I think the Nair brothers and so on, Vicky Nair. Next. Then we decided it is time to explore Chile. They also had a fantastic desert called the Atacama Desert. And keep rolling, geysers, sailing, river rafting on the rivers, and then going to Patagonia, which is as unique as the Himalaya. Next, please. Keep moving and staying in very innovative geodesic, eco-friendly resorts and going on to trek up to their higher points of a place called Torres del Paine. That's our daughter and our friend, all making it to this point. That's Charu, who's finally got there, huffing and puffing, and did some, fly fishing, beautiful trout, very eco-friendly, even their hooks are barbless. And this gentleman was an inspiration because he's a guy called Doug Tompkins, who was the founder of North Face, Patagonia, Espire. He's a billionaire. And he bought something like 2 million acres of land in Patagonia, and he gifted it back to the Chilean government. And after that, the president of Chile, who addressed our summit there, she, in honor of his gift, made a huge amount of million, acres of area on the sea as a marine national park. Trans-Siberia was next, which is a wonderful train journey for people who are getting on and don't want it very energetic. Wonderful tribes in Siberia, like the Old Believers. This is a place in Mongolia where we took a diversion and we didn't do it till Vladivostok. And this is where you found the dinosaur egg. The first time that the dinosaur egg was found was there. Finally, we found our son had gone to the Antarctic. It was more with an expedition that is hoping to create awareness about the protection of Antarctic. And then we followed suit. And this, for me, is one of the most amazing parts of the planet that you can visit. And that's going on Zodiac boats, looking at the penguins. Keep rolling, please. And the sea lions going on very close, up close to whales, and naturally having a whale of a time as well. And here again, we found there were 4 Stephanians, and we carried our little, pennant. That's Charu, Vivek Srivastav, and myself and Panthaki. And that's, of course, Vellum girls, not to be outdone, pulled out their own flag with my wife Anita and Sonia Philip. And that's Charu doing what is an obligation, which is a polar plunge before you come back. Next. And we have a lot of support from very large tourism organizations around the world, because the idea is that if civil society and governments could be told not to exploit Antarctica when the treaty comes down in 2041 on mining, then I think there is a hope we will save the planet. Otherwise, we could really screw up this wonderful, wonderful area. And of course, we know that sea levels could rise, etc. And like this little thing is looking, will her fate be sealed? Next one was, of course, to Costa Rica, the very last one before the pandemic. And I need to move on because I'm losing time, where we went and explored the rainforests again. It is one of the most beautiful countries as far as ecotourism is concerned. And that's again, some of the college friends who were with me, and I put them in. Vivek Bharti not looking very happy. And can you just go back for a minute? And I think Gotu Nair is trying to outdo him, looking a little cooler. And then, of course, we also had a bunch of people who went rafting, and we discovered we were 6 of us from college. And this is an interesting one where Vicky Nair falls off the raft. And when we are giving him a hand, what he does in return is show us his leg, because I think he was trying to say, I need a leg up. Next, please. And then he and his wife, Chef, fell off again. And this time he gave us if you can go back to the last slide, at least he gave us a heads up, as it were. So next slide. And then his wife is rescued, and she's very happy because in the very close distance, next one, you could see a mamba snake staring at them. So that was a quick exit. One of the good ones in India, of course, I've done recently is a walking safari through Satpura National Park, which is absolutely fantastic. And you can do canoeing, you can do a host of things. And the last few slides are on Ladakh, my last trip, which is again a wonderful experience. We went to Zero RD, the border of in Baltistan, which is Turtuk, and the lovely little babes, the children. Next. And this is the Zero RD place where you are looking at the Pakistani bunkers. And the great thing that has happened this year is we've signed a MOU with the Ministry of Tourism and the United Nations Environment Program. Atul and Arvind, who are part of our group, are holding forth on the World Tourism Day. We've launched the Responsible Traveler campaign, and we are delighted that all these partner organizations are helping us support the cause of conservation and tourism, because we do believe that ultimately, if you use tourism well, it's a very powerful force. Next, please. And that's judging for some of the tourism Oscars, and there's such good examples that I'm convinced that actually it's a great tool for conservation. Our family, of course, gets inspiration by looking at the Himalaya, which is right there. But every time I go gardening, I wonder if it was a good thing that I got into. But for that, maybe you can ask my Mad Hatter wife. With that, I'll say thanks and ask Charu, and over to you, Pitu.
You need to share your video also, 1 second, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, Pitu, are we doing okay on time, or do we have 2 minutes? It's 120 seconds.
Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, there's no sound. Charu, are you getting sound? No. Well. Okay. Kuldeep, I think there's no sound to it, but doesn't matter. We'll.
Okay, Mandy, thank you very much.
Great. Yeah. Okay. It's almost. Great.
Okay, Mandy, before I hand over to Atul and to Charu, I have one question for you. Where did you meet the most interesting ladies in this entire trips of yours?
That now, given the fact that Anita is within, boxing distance, I think I have to take a call on that one. Yeah. Yeah. No, but are you talking of, local people in different countries, or?
No, I'm talking about your experiences. You're talking about IBEX expeditions, so you must have done some expeditions.
Okay. No, I think when we were all in college, the big thing was the bloody blonde story, wasn't it? So I guess all roads led to Europe. Huh? Anyway.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. We are now going to switch to Charu. Charu, as you know, is not only from St. Stephen's College, but he's from Mayo College also before that. And then he went on to North Carolina to Davidson College, where he also was did his schooling or his college work. He's been a national springboard champion and all kinds of things in sports in so many areas. And then he finally became a sports commentator and a sports career, a casting career. He started in 1982 at the Asian Games and joined the National India Network and has done many things since then. He's a long-standing sports management career person who set up the Pro Kabaddi League in India. That's a new one. And this has started from 2014 and has pole vaulted Kabaddi into becoming India's second most watched sport. Wow. He continues to be the voice of Indian sport and continues to work as a freelance sports anchor and a strong Stephanian, as we've seen in these pictures here. He's been going with Mandy all over the bloody countryside and having a great time while doing it. So, Charu, thank you very much for joining us, and do get on with your comments and your questions to Mandy. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Pittu. I suppose I can take the liberty of calling myself somewhat of a climber, and I can assure you that climbers find it very difficult to say anything good about their friends, because it's a dull thing to kind of sock it to each other. Mandy talked about pulling my socks up. I had to pull his whole body up several places, but those are many long stories. I have only two regrets. One, of course, I didn't stay to do my MA in whatever it could have been in college, because we had such a great time in St. Stephen's. I have to put that in here because that's one of my major regrets. Why didn't I? I don't know. And the second, of course, is that despite Mandy's open invitation over all these decades, I couldn't do enough of the outdoors because I love the outdoors. I just unfortunately wasted a lot of time doing many other things. Perhaps I shouldn't use the word wasted, but I did many other things. Mandy and I would certainly say this. Mandy, of course, typically denies it, but he's my closest friend, because when you climb, the level of friendship is at a completely different plane, because you're talking about literally saving each other's lives and what have you. And Mandy, apart from many other things, I'll keep this very short because Atul still has to speak, and he, of course, is the maestro. Is a really careful outdoor man. I think that's a key thing that everybody needs to. I like to share that with everybody else, because I can wait if somebody else wants to speak. But anyway,
no, go right ahead, Charu. There's just some chatter. Go ahead.
So I think one of the many things I deeply appreciated about the fact that I went to all these fabulous places with Mandy is the fact that he does take extreme care. And there's a huge lesson in there, because the outdoors is obviously, as we all know, extremely dangerous. And it's so easy to overstep and do something which is just beyond stupidity. And then, of course, you know more. So that's something I deeply appreciate about Mandy. I just don't want to say much because there's so many other people who might want to question. I was there with Mandy on so many of these. Pittu, you asked where did he meet the best? You know what? Of sailors, they say one in every port. For Mandy, I'll say one on every trail. But I also just want to set the record straight, because Mandy has done a lot of things, but his father kept asking, but kaam kya karega? But anyway, he did well. And he did well in life largely because I think back in 85 or so, 84, he had the good sense to marry somebody who was fabulously well organized. So Mandy is all about Anita making sure that Mandy does well. So there we are. I hope Anita's within earshot.
Yeah.
Get a brownie out of that.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to get you on some of the Zoom chats like this, because at least I hear a halfway decent compliment once in about 30 years or something. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Mandy. Do you want to react to anything Charu said about the wonderful things you've been organizing in your life in IBEX expeditions?
No, I mean, it's just been a great joy, Pitu, and, to be able to not only do it for customers from around the world, but within India. And we have a sort of a club where we call it a fellowship. And that's the one journey that we've been leading every year. And I'm lucky to have a few friends from college as well. And it's been a great joy to discover not only different parts of this planet, but also, I think, to be able to address some of the issues so that you are using tourism as a really good tool to take so many things forward. And I'm glad that some of those things work. And I'm very happy that the private sector is really going the extra mile, as is with many sort of governments around the world. So God willing, if we do things right, it's a good way to go. Thank you.
So Pitu, sorry, just a quick addition to the fact that I forgot that Mandy was and remains the first and the truest soldier for eco-tourism and eco-everything. In fact, I used to keep saying eco-Mandy because every second sentence he was like eco this and eco that. And as we know now, it has tremendous value. So he alone, I'm sure, has saved a few years or ensured that our planet lives on a few more years. Just want to add that.
But Charu, that's something to do with my being a Sardar, is just to say eco hi gal hai.
Eco hi gal hai.
You're also the pun master of the group. So wonderful, Mandy. Thanks for adding that. And now we are moving on to Atul Bagai. Atul Bagai is not only from college, where, like all us great people from college, he also did history, both in BA and in MA. And then Atul went on to join the IAS, where he spent 17 years. And from there, he...
You muted yourself.
Oh.
Pitu, you
Pitu,
muted
you're
yourself.
on mute. Pitu.
You touched something you shouldn't have.
Uh-oh.
I'll unmute. Sorry.
Yeah.
Basically talking about Atul Bagai, who has been not only in college doing history as all the great people have done, but he subsequently was in the IAS for 17 years and then joined the UN Environment Program in 2000 and has been with them since then and done great things on the environment front. And we're lucky to have Atul here in India with us to contribute to the tremendous success of the environment program that's happening in India. So Atul, would you like to talk something about what you've been doing with Mandy and how this whole thing pans out? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pitu. In fact, I was thinking of talking a little about environment, and Mandy mentioned in his last few slides of the efforts we are doing. But I think your question to Mandy about ladies in every port and Charu's remark also of Kaam Kya Karega, I just thought I'll start with two anecdotes of how I got linked to Mandy. In 1976, when I joined college, I used to see Mandy and the other climbers, Charu and all, walking down the corridors with those heavy gear of trekking and with these beautiful girls following them everywhere. And I, coming from a small school, not the Mayo types or whatever, I said, this is, join hiking club and this is one way ticket to get to know girls. So I approached the hiking club and I said, I would like to join. And I was asked to fill in a form. And the very first question was, what trekking have you done in your life? And that's where, I lost the battle, because the only trek I had done in my life till I joined college was a 500, 600 meter trek of Mansa Devi temple in Haridwar. And that was all. And I think that's where I lost touch with hiking. And of course, where Mandy has reached in the last 36 years. And Charu, when you said his father was the one who said, Kaam Kya Karega, I get reminded of another story of another Stephanian contemporary, Yusuf Zahir. who started his life with river rafting, and my wife, when she was district magistrate in Tehri, gave him the very first license for running the river rafting camp. And Yusuf used to tell us that while he was in school and then in college, he used to go to his father and say, I want to become a doctor, or I want to become a civil servant or something. And his father used to hit him and say, you go and do river rafting, you go and do mountaineering. Why do you want to study and all this? So, there are two paradigms which are going on. And I think supporting parents like that is what led to such amazing feats by Mandeep, by Charu, by Yusuf, and so many other people. But I think coming back to the last few slides of Mandeep, when he was talking about the MOU which we signed, and this year also started the decade of ecosystem restoration globally. For the next 10 years, there's going to be a lot of focus on ecosystem restoration. And the reason why this focus globally is going to come on is also because of the pandemic that we are going through right now. And the whole world has faced this pandemic, and there's scientific evidence now to show that these zoonotic diseases are a result of the ecosystem loss that the last 4 to 5 decades. And if we don't look at ecosystem and those beautiful sites Mandy showed in his slides, if we don't restore them to their pristine level, I don't think we have enough time left for this planet. And as a suggestion to Charu or to Mandy, meaning you've been to all those beautiful sites over the last 30 years, maybe a very good idea to start doing a little bit of analysis of what is the status of those sites now. Choose 10 or 15 or 20 hotspots and see how they are. Meaning, if you look at the satellite pictures of the Gangotri Glacier, for example, in the last 50 years, that glacier has shrunk by almost 1/3. So I think it's a very good exercise and a mapping that needs to be done, because I think the message Mandy is trying to give is that if we don't try to preserve these places, and from a tourism perspective, tourism will never flourish if these places don't exist in the pristine state of ecosystem that they are. So I think that's going to be an important element, and that's where I wanted to ask Mandy to also dwell a little bit more on. We all signed a MOU on 27 September, the World Tourism Day, and 3 Stephanians got together to do it. Arvind, who's the Secretary Tourism, I heading UNEP, and Mandy, the founding president of Responsible Tourism. But Mandy, it may be a good idea to just highlight also within this whole perspective of this focus on environment now in the tourism sector. What are you planning to do under your Responsible Tourism campaign, or the Responsible Traveler campaign that was launched on 27th?
Thanks, Atul. Yeah, it was, significant that I guess we were able to do this, and thanks to all your support and, Arvind and the rest of the gang on being on the same page. And I think the idea is that, when we started off about 12 years ago, when the government asked us to make this national body, the idea was that we would first address what are the right and wrong things that were happening, and what's the right thing that the industry could do, which is one good way to start. The other thing was to help government come up with, good policies. And that's been an uphill kind of a struggle between tourism and between MOEFCC and all that. But we are trying to work together. And I think the UNEP presence and your presence here will hopefully act like a glue between these two ministries and ourselves, which don't tend to communicate. So the idea was that if we've got plans in place for the industry, we've got reasonably good policy happening at the government level, then we need to look at also the traveler. And that's the reason why we launched this campaign, which will affect each one of us in the way we travel. I mean, something as simple as, we've come out with a guideline of 22 points, and they're actually not rocket science. It's something as simple as saying, let us take a pledge that each time we travel, we carry our own steel flask for water. Because everywhere you go, unless you're in the wilderness, you will get, ultraviolet or filtered water. So why do we need to buy single-use plastic and create a lot of garbage issues, especially in places where let's say Ladakh, my last trip there. I mean, they don't even have a, incinerator. So everything there goes into landfill. So it's things like that. So I believe that if we tackle all these, then I think we are on the way to really making a difference on the ground. And given the numbers of people that travel within India and about the 20 million that come into India, or maybe 15 million that come into India, 20 million that go out, and it's over, I believe, about 100 million that travel within the country. There could be significant negative impacts that we can help reduce. So I think it's exciting that the advocacy is going to happen. Hopefully, the government and organizations like UN can take on advocacy role, and then we'll bring out the carrot and stick policy. Like we've also got this idea of intelligent app, where basically suppose you see somebody chucking garbage on a road, and you have an app which can take a photograph and put a GPS locator and take a photo, and it goes back to Ministry of Tourism. At least there's a pressure that bhai koi hamara photo le lega, something like that. So it's all a work in progress, but I do believe that it's a first step in a very collective effort, because like they say, 1,000-mile journey starts with a single step, etc. So we've got to go on this road. We can't get jaded and so on. And to that extent, I think we've got a good partnership in place. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mandy. Thanks for that. And I do hope that others will join. Atul, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to just take about a minute and not more than that, meaning putting what Mandy said in perspective. In fact, we in UNEP at a global level recently did a survey, and I think this is the whole context of COVID-19 and how tourism is becoming so important, and sustainable tourism more so. And this survey was done basically to understand the environmental impacts of COVID-19 on the tourism sector. And the region, of course, was pan-European region. And this survey was done in 2021, June. And we did receive about 135 responses from NGOs, from governments, tourism business associations, research institutions in about 35 countries. And I would like to highlight that this consumer research amid the pandemic suggested that we are really in a watershed moment now, where the majority of travelers say that the pandemic has made them want to travel more sustainably in the future. And that's a very important aspect. And I think that underpins the objective behind the Responsible Traveler campaign, which Mandy is talking about. And travelers certainly are now more particularly concerned about issues like excess waste or threat to local wildlife and natural habitats, overcrowding at popular sites and destinations, and greenhouse gas emissions. So I think we are at a tipping point in this whole sustainable tourism paradigm. And I think this is a time when each one of us who's present here and outside needs to look at traveling in a more responsible way.
Thanks, Atul. Thank you. I think it's time now to open up the discussion to everybody, and anybody wants to comment. There is one question in the chat box, Mandy. It says, could you tell us a little bit more about Iswaran Bhartan, sir?
Yeah. The reason I didn't put it in my presentation, which I do sometimes, like the one I just presented at the Banff Mountain Festival, I did mention that my start was very shaky. And even though, possibly Charu makes a point, maybe it was at a huge cost, where we actually lost a Stephanian friend on a climb that we did on a peak called Mulkila, which was in Himachal Pradesh. And this was after I'd come back from Europe, learning all the cutting edge techniques and everything. But you know how it is with risk and so the three of us were roped together. There was Kanhai, Rohan Kanhai Datta, Ishwaran Bharatan, and myself. And he fell through in a crevasse in the middle. And both of us, of course, did our anchoring on either side. We went down to the crevasse, but sadly, it was an hourglass-shaped crevasse, and he had got stuck in that. And despite all our efforts to go down and try and rescue him out, we had to then stay the night on the little lower down in the glacier. The next day we went down looking for a rescue to get a team by helicopter and a couple of days. And it was a very, very sad moment for both me and Can personally. And at that point, of course, I almost came to a point where I said, maybe I should chuck it all in, and this adventure and expeditioning is too desperate, to lose a friend. But anyhow, I guess, I did give one more expedition a shot and things went well. But it was a very heart-wrenching moment. And, we lost. And some of these things are which you can't really predict. It's a bit like avalanches and, you make all the preparations. But at some point, I guess if the outdoors, gets the better of you, that is an inherent risk which we do recognize before we go, taking on. So, yeah, that was a very sad moment for me personally. Yeah.
Thanks. Ranu Das has a question. Ranu, would you like to go ahead, please?
Thank you, Pitu. Mandy, hugely impressed and hugely jealous. Hugely jealous. But, I have to say only two sentences. I have to thank you for two things, Mandy, which I don't know if I ever did. In 2010, when we wanted to go and start our journey on the Silk Road, I asked your advice as to who should arrange the tour. And you introduced me to a wonderful travel company in Beijing who did a phenomenal tour for us. So thank you for that. I don't know if I ever thanked you after that. And the second thing, Pitu, in answer to your question, I also have to thank Pitu because the most beautiful woman I ever met was in Kashgar, a Uyghur woman in Xinjiang on the tour that Mandy helped organize.
God bless you. God bless you. Okay, Mrs. Sharma. Yes, CK Sharma ji, go ahead.
Yeah, Mandy, you showed a slide in which you were showing that the houses are no longer environmental friendly and the change in the architecture of the houses. Now, this is something which has been giving me a lot of pain ever since I was a small child. I started in Nainital studying there. And now up to this year in Garhwal, where I travel for teaching, what can be done? Because this is something really very sad, that instead of the roofs which were earlier, all flat roofs and multi-stories are coming up now. Is something being done in this direction, and how much is it affecting the environment by changing this architecture?
This is another big sort of angst that a lot of us have, either who are conscious travelers or who have homes in the hills and so on. And we see this kind of wrong development happening. And I think both government and private sector are party to it. So we as the Responsible Tourism Society have taken it upon us, like there are several good organizations, but I think, to have a kind of a national platform, we are also talking to architects. I mean, we are suggesting now, not just at the hill architecture, if you look at what has happened in, desert areas or what has happened in forest areas, you have a lot of incongruous construction going on. I mean, the reason why you love Jaisalmer today is because they made one simple rule that every construction will be of that yellow Jaisalmer stone. Isn't that such a simple common sense thing to do? Similarly, we are saying that the roof styling of any area, especially in the Himalaya, which are specific, is so beautiful. Why do you want to mess it up by putting flat roofs or multi-story? And this is exactly the debate that has been going on. And we are also now actually trying to build out a small paper which will contain guidelines. Because you see, 2 years ago, I was at Uttarakhand in the Investors Summit, and I realized that a lot of money bags come and they put in money into projects like which the government wants them, whether it's hotels or restaurants or hospitals or X or Y, but they have no clue about the kind of materials that they need to use or the kind of sensitivity to the environment in landscape and so on. So, this is a huge issue. But as I said, again, we hope that better sense will prevail. In fact, I'll tell you something, even the airports in India that are being built, we are suggesting from our society point of view that you cannot use plastic and glass alone. If you go to Madurai or you go to Dehradun, they look the same. So where is the sense of place, when you land? And so, yeah, it's a huge issue, but I suppose at least some forums have started talking, and we are hoping that the architects themselves will have a national body that can actually advise, governments and all. So you're absolutely right. This is a huge, huge issue.
Wonderful.
Thank you,
Thanks
Mandy.
for
Thank
that response, Mandy. Anybody else? Would anybody else like to ask or suggest or comment about something? Anybody else on the group today?
Right.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to ask for final comments by Charu and Atul. Charu, any final comments?
But I would just like to perhaps add or question Mandy. I was holding my comments and questions back because I thought, I would defer to others who might be keen or equally keen, because Mandy and I, of course, talk regularly anyway. But Mandy, what's the direction? We keep talking about in many ways things are working out badly for the environment. But is the younger generation, and of course, what is true India, who alone knows? It's a complicated question. But is the younger generation generally trending, according to you, to be far more aware of these things? And are we in a better place because of the youngsters, or are we hurtling towards even more disaster because of their lack of concern? What is your thought?
Well, I think great question, Charu. And I think if you just look at even the kids around us, our own and their friends and circles and so on, I mean, it's a delight to see the kind of activist mode that they're in and that they want to do something for the planet. So I feel very encouraged when we meet a lot of people, which is equally to say that I'm not an unrealistic person to know that there's a large janta that is just consumer oriented, who will throw the bucks and, do the sort of Punjabi puppy number of whatever, flash and everything and materialism. But I think the right sort tending to prevail, the amount of stuff you see on social media, the kind of stuff that they're standing up for, even critiquing governments about it. I mean, you've got the Greta Thunbergs who are, way ahead of the curve in terms of the inspiration value that they are asking people to come and to relook things. So I'm very encouraged that, this is something which is a good, positive thing, and we should only encourage such youngsters, even if they so-called don't have a regular plan in their head vis-a-vis a job. They might be doing NGO, they might be doing non-profit, but we really need to encourage those kids.
Thanks, Mandy. Atul, any final comments?
I just wanted to say that Mandy was talking about 15, 20 years about ecotourism, and now we are all talking of sustainable tourism. So there are a lot of facets that are coming in. But at one level, I think tourism sector is one sector where this metaphor of thinking globally and acting locally is so very important, because each and everyone needs to be very responsible towards the tourism sector and towards maintaining the pristine environment around us. So I think this whole campaign that has been started at an India level is one of the first in the world. There are certain campaigns like this globally in Costa Rica or in some of the European countries. But I think India is taking the lead in this regard. And I think we all must try to support this whole responsible traveler campaign, which the Ministry of Tourism and RTSOI has started.
Thank you so much. I think we're really now at the final time, and it's upon me to thank I.L.A for giving us this Zoom facility, which he always does. Thank you so much for it. And this will be hosted on YouTube also, in case anybody wants to see this later on. And thanks to Mandy, thanks to Atul Bagai, and thanks to Charu Sharma for being with us and giving us their insight into this absolutely very important area. And thanks, Mandy, for sharing your lovely travels across the world with us and inspiring each one of us in this journey that you have undertaken in your life. Thank you so much. Thanks to the College Alumni Association, to the principal, to Anne for setting this information through the whole alumni network, and to Mandy for putting it on Facebook, etc. And we'll join you again next month, where we'll have the next SKT talk. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Get to your malt quickly. Thank you.
Thanks, Pitu. Thank you, Charu, Atul, all
Thank
of
you.
you. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. See you again soon.
Thank you.